Hey there, I'm your host Zoe, and this is part 5 of the inventory system series. In the last episode, we created a UI for our inventory, and in today's video, we'll be creating some interaction within that UI. So let's begin. Let's begin by going into our content drawer and navigating to our UI folder. Then we'll right-click and create a new widget, which we can call WB_item prompt. Inside of this widget, we want to add a canvas panel like that and a border. So this will be the outline of our item prompt. For the X, I'll say 140, and for the Y, I'll do 170. And let's just zoom into this. For the background color, or the border color rather, I'll do my copy paste from my document into here, like so. And we can save this color as well for a future reference. And yeah, next, let's do a vertical box. And the purpose of this is to house all of the buttons and the texts we're going to have. So let's have a search for a button. Drop this into here. For the padding, we'll do 2,4. And for the color, what we can do is I'll copy my button color like that, put it into tint, and we'll save it. And for the hovered and pressed, I'll grab this color. And where am I? I'm here. Tint. Paste that in like so. Save it, and we can copy it there. So that's our button color covered. And let's also rename this to be button use. And let's look for a text. We'll drag that into there. Font size, we'll do 15 works. And for the text block, let's say use. And for the text itself, it doesn't really matter. We only want to have the text drop to be variable. Let's copy our button and paste it a few times. For the second text, we will do is variable because this will be our drop text. And this will change from take, store, and drop. For the text itself, we'll give it a drop. Third one, we can change to split. And the last one we can do inspect. And the border looks a little large, or did I mess up somewhere? What if I do fill? There we are. And this is starting to look pretty nice. Next, we want to head over to the event graph. And inside here, we want the event construct. From here, what we'll do is we will get our border. So we have to go back. And we want this to be variable. And let's give it a name. Border_item prompt sounds good. And back in here, we'll drag this and do canvas slot as canvas slot. We'll do that, and then we'll do set position. And the position that this will spawn on will depend on where the mouse is. So we'll do a function called get mouse position on viewport. So like that, in here, and the return value into the position. And when we leave outside of this border, we'll do a mouse event on mouse leave. That's what we want. And we'll simply do a remove from parent. Next, let's compile and save and go into our inventory slot, which is right here. And we want to check if we are pressing with our mouse. So go into the functions, override, and we're going to override on preview mouse button down. Inside here, we want to see if our mouse has been pressed. So on the mouse event, we'll do is mouse button down, and we are checking for our right mouse. So let's do that. Get a branch connected like so. And before we even do this, we want to see if our slot is a valid slot, because if it's not valid, we don't want the item prompt to show up. So let's get our item ID and do a not equals, get a branch and plug this in as the condition. Perfect. So we can go ahead if it is valid, and on true, we will create a widget, which will be our item prompt. Now here we need few values, so we'll pass them in a second. But if it is valid, let's firstly promote to a variable, wb_item prompt, and add to viewport. Now, we're only doing this if this is not valid. If it is valid, we want to get it, do a validated get. And if it is already on the screen, what we'll do is we'll remove it from the screen, remove from parent, and only then we'll spawn it. And if it's not valid, we just spawn it anyway. And at the very end, we can return this as handled. Perfect. And on the flip side, if it's not equal to anything, we can return it as unhandled. And there we go. Let's pass in the values then. So we need to go back into our item prompt. Let's compile first and save. In here, we need to know about the inventory component. And we also need to know about the index. So let's do that. And this will be of type integer. Also instance editable and exposed on spawn. Compile and save. Let's go back into our inventory slot, refresh this. Now we can pass in our values. So we have the inventory component handy, but we don't have our index. So to get it, we can create it here. Index integer, instance editable, expose on spawn, plug it in. And in order for this to have a value, we need to pass it in our inventory. So let's go into our inventory. And on the graph, if we refresh this, you should get the index, simply drag in from the array and pass it in, compile and save. So with that all done, we can go ahead and let's create our function in our blueprint, or not blueprint, but in our, blueprint component inventory. So in here, let's create a new function called split stack. Inside here, we want to know about the index that we are splitting. And let's get our slots, our array, and do a get a copy. We're getting a copy of this, and I'll split this and then promote both of these values. So local underscore item ID. And for the quantity, we'll do local underscore item quantity. There we go. And connect here. Next, I'll have a sequence, which on one will have the sound effects and the update, and on one will have the code. So let's take care of the easier stuff. Let's get the item ID, do a get row, give ourselves some space, put in our data table, do a break, get our sound effects, do a break, minimize this so we only see the sound effects. And here we are interested in move, so hide everything else. Do a place sound at location, and the location will be the owner of this component. So this refers to ourselves or whoever owns this component. Get owner and get actor location. Plug that in there, and we're almost golden. We need to get our update function here. So in the event graph, let's create an event dispatcher called on inventory updated. Let's create a custom event titled update inventory and call this in here. Next, let's go ahead and enter at our split stack again. And we want to implement this custom event at the very end on 1 in our sequence. We also want to implement this in our inventory because yes, we refresh the inventory, but if you add something, it won't know to update. It'll only update if you open the inventory again. So let's head into our inventory once again in the graph. On for each loop completed, we'll drag out, or before we do that, get our inventory component and do a bind event on inventory updated. From this event, we can do a create event, custom create event should let me create something. What if I refresh? Something's wrong. Why is this wrong? Create event, no function specified. What do you mean no function specified? Let's do a custom event update inventory. And what if I will clear the children anyway, and then we'll plug that back in here. And here I need to pass in this. So create event. We'll try this again. And it's very weird. Does not want to let me put this in. So I found the issue. All it was is that I forgot to refresh my inventory component in here. So we've created the event dispatcher, but never compiled. So compile it first, go in here, and then once you create the event, we can create a matching event. But I have one here, so I'll simply search for it, update inventory. And now if we compile and save, it should be good. So let's head back into our blueprint component and go ahead with our function. So on 0, I want to see if our item quantity is equal to 1. If it's equal to 1, well, what happens is that we can't split because it's the last one in the stack. But if it's not equal to 1, well then we can split, but first we want to see, do we have space available? So let's get our any slots available, do a branch. And if we do have space, this is true. What I'll do is get this item slots and do set array element. The index will be our new available index, and the item we can split, plug in our item ID. And the item quantity will actually come from getting the local quantity, dividing it by 2, because we're splitting the stack, and promote this to a local variable called the local underscore split quantity. And we'll set it right there. And for here, get the split quantity, and this is our new slot. So let's comment it, new slot. And for our original slot, let's copy this. I select everything and press Q to make it nice and pretty. For the index, we want the original index. So get index. And for the item quantity, we actually want the original minus the split quantity. Connect that in there. And I believe this should work now. So let's compile and save and see what happens. Hit play. I collect my mushrooms. They appear in my inventory. And if I split, I get nothing. And let's see why that is. So I never actually implemented this function in our item prompt. So let's go back and on the button split, do onClicked. And let's get our inventory component, our index. And now let's do split stack. And let's pass in our index. And at the very end, let's remove stack. So if you clicked on the button, the button prompt, the item prompt will disappear. Let's try this again. Pick my mushrooms up. I split and boom, it works. Put the original slot, not so much. So let's see what happened. Blueprint component inventory. And this is wrong. This should be the item quantity minus the split quantity. So let's give this a third attempt. And there we are. Finally works. So let's put in some more mushrooms. Select this and let's hit play. Let's collect all of them. We have an even amount now, so if we split it, it's 3. But if it's not even, it'll do original, we'll get the higher amount, and the new amount will get the split quantity. Next, let's go ahead and create a use item function. So in our content drawer, back in our inventory component, we'll create a new function called use item. And we want to know the index that we're using. So let's get index and we'll get our inventory slot and we'll get a copy of this index. Like so. I'll split this open and promote these values again to a local variable like we did with our split stack function. Item ID and the local item quantity. Once again, we'll have a sequence, and on one we'll have the sound effects and the update. So I could actually go ahead and steal this code from my split stack, copy it and paste it in. And that just saves us some work. And if I compile, I should have 0 errors, and that is true. Next, on 0, we are going to check if our item quantity is equal once again to 0, or if it's equal to 1. If the item quantity is equal to 1, meaning it's the last one in our stack, well, we can go ahead and get our array element, set array element with our current index. So get index, and we can split this open, meaning we wipe it, nothing goes in there. On false, in that case, there's more than 1. Let's create a new function called update stack. And in update stack, we want to know about the index and about the quantity. So item quantity. So the quantity we're minusing. Now this time, we're not getting a copy, but a reference. And the difference being is a copy is just a copy, but a reference will directly change the value within that array. So here we'll do set members, and the members we are interested in are the item quantity. So simply click on the dropdown, get your item quantity, should show up, and we'll break out from here, and the item quantity minus the item quantity there. So get item quantity will be our new quantity that we set in. I don't connected pins. And yes, I believe that is all for now. So let's get this update stack, give it the correct information. So our index and the item quantity is going to be 1 because we're only using 1 item at a time. Next, we want to play the effect or spawn the effect. And to do that, we need to get the drop location. So let's create a new function called get drop location. Inside here, we'll get our owner and we'll get the actor, get actor location, and we'll get the actor forward vector. And what I want to do is I want to do a return node. And I want to return this plus this value with a random unit vector cone in degrees. Now you can play around with this value. I found for larger stacks, if you're dropping 10 plus items, a radius of 55 works really well. So just play around with this. And we're going to multiply this, a multiply sign, right click and convert this to a either single or double precision, does not really matter. And we'll give it a value of 120. And plug that in there. And plug this into the return. And we can title it as the location. And there we are. And this can be a pure function. Compile that. And let's do spawn actor from class. Now we need to get our class somehow. So back into our data table we go. Or rather, we actually could create another function. Let's go ahead and do get item data or data. In here, we want to know the item ID. Let's do get row, plug in our data table row, and we'll simply returning the out row. And we'll call this the item data. And this is also a pure function. Compile that, exit. Oh, what's the issue there? Ah, that's with the spawn actor. So since we have the drop location, we can plug it in. And since we have the item data, get our local item ID, break this, and we have everything here. So let's plug the effect in, close all the unconnected pins. And that is it. Let's see what happens if I compile. Yeah, we also want to plug in this there because the same thing should happen. We should get the effect if it's the last item or if we're just updating the stack. And compile this, save it. We can safely exit. Let's go back into our item prompt. So UI, item prompt, and let's implement our use button. Unclicked, get copy of the index and the component, and we'll do use item. Plug the index in there, connect it like so, and we'll also do remove at the very end once the button is pressed. Compile, save, and let's give this a test. So I'm walking about, picking up my mushrooms, and I want to eat one. What happens? Boom, we get our restore 20 health effect, which is just a print string. You can implement an effect if you want, but since this is an inventory series, I won't go that far. So that's all, and in the next episode, we'll cover how to transfer these items. So if you liked the video, leave a like. If you didn't like the video, leave a dislike. And as always, happy developing.